So the fun and games begin in Parliament this week. In fact, they've already started before the Parliament is convened tomorrow. For the second time in a few days, speculation swept through the national capital that the Gillard government had found a compliant Liberal to take on the Deputy Speakership and agree not to oppose the government on crucial votes. And for the second time, the Liberal in question poured cold water on the story. And on the policy front, the Prime Minister has announced the terms of reference and the makeup of a very unusual, possibly unique parliamentary committee to try to resolve how Australia should establish a price on carbon as part of the government's strategy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. To shed a little more light on what we might expect from this first week of a new chapter in Australian politics, I'm joined from Canberra by Chris Uhlmann, filling in for political editor Heather Hewitt. Chris, first to the issue of the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker. Tell us what happened to the suggestion that the Liberals' Peter Slipper might have defied his leader to become the Deputy Speaker for the government.
Yeah, well, there were two party room meetings this afternoon. One was the Liberal party room meeting and the other one was the joint party room meeting, which followed it immediately. And apparently at the Liberal party room meeting, someone looked around, as I understand it, the Senator, and said, "Is everybody here?" And then it turned out that Peter Slipper wasn't there, and neither did he turn up to the joint party room meeting either. Then speculation began, and it began, I think, from very high up in the party, that Peter Slipper might be considering doing a deal with the government in the same way that Alex Somley was considered to be doing a deal with the government last week. But then we did see again another statement put out, Peter Slipper again saying that he is interested in the position but not under the terms that the Labor Party would have it. They're beginning to look a little bit like those statements, the statement from Guy Fawkes after having been down to speak to the establishment.
Well, in fact, I noticed that one journalist said that he'd rung Peter Slipper when his absence was noted, and the MP said that he'd just got out of the shower. So
It was a little late in the day to be getting out of the shower, Kerry, but of course that's always possible. There may well have been another reason why he wasn't there, but it tells you something of the temperament inside the coalition at the moment, that immediately a suspicion fell that he might be doing a deal with the government.
So Harry Jenkins will be Speaker again from the government side, but what is now likely to happen with regard to the Deputy Speaker, and what's the significance of it anyway?
Well, the government always wanted to do a deal whereby the Speaker's vote would be paired, because under the Constitution they lose a vote. They've got to put up the Speaker, and the Speaker then only has a casting and not a deliberative vote. In the agreement they struck with the independents and the opposition, when the opposition believed it might well be the government, they had that opportunity for the Deputy Speaker to essentially act as a pair the whole time. They're looking for a similar kind of arrangement. And both parties now, it's interesting, both parties' leadership are now having the discretion given to them by their party rooms to decide on what happens with the Deputy Speaker late in the afternoon, depending on circumstances. Now, that's something, Kerry, that we would never normally pay any attention to, but we'll wait with bated breath for about 5 p.m. tomorrow to see what happens there.
Because theoretically, if there is no pairing arrangement, then that reduces the government to 75, effectively on most votes, 75 against 74. And we see from the question mark about whether Rob Oakeshot's going to make it into the Parliament in his first week in this new situation, because his wife is due to have a child at any time. And I guess that just underscores any slight unpredictability could lead to a member being away on a day that a vote of no confidence gets taken, or some other crucial vote.
That's right, Kerry. The government then has the barest of bare margins, if you take the idea that people like Tony Crook from Western Australia will vote with the coalition should they do something in the chamber. But members here now, and particularly new members, are terrified of the fact that they might get caught in the loo while there's an important division going on, because the opposition has made it patently clear that it is going to play hardball, that they won't be pairing for just any reason, and they expect the Prime Minister to be in the chamber for every important vote. That means that the Prime Minister won't be able to wander away to see a visiting head of state for fear that she might miss a division. So they're taking this very seriously indeed.
And then there's the very independent Bob Catter from Queensland, who's indicated that he's not going to change his practice of often being away for votes that he doesn't regard as important, because if there is a more important matter as far as he's concerned in his electorate, that's where he'll be.
And I think that's where the government may well want him, because that would take one out of the opposition side of the ledger. But it will be a finely balanced game. And of course, things will happen. And that's leaving aside the possibility that someone might suffer a heart murmur or a serious illness. And then we have a by-election. And then that really would get interesting if it's in a place like Queensland where the government doesn't want it. So we are in a finely balanced chamber. It's going to be extraordinary to watch. And it will be a white-knuckle ride for the whips. Who would want those jobs?
And one of the other fascinating developments today, this new parliamentary committee, which is designed, and this was the deal between the government and the Greens, which is designed, the government hopes to come up with a new formula in place of the ETS that didn't get up. But when you look at the potential makeup of that committee, the government could find itself in the minority.
That's right, 3 government members, the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister and the Climate Change Minister will be the government's representatives, 2 Greens and at this stage 1 independent, but it is being left open to the other independents, and that would be Andrew Wilkie and Rob Oakeshott, whether or not they wish to join this committee. So potentially the government could be outnumbered, but of course the government can decide how it responds to this committee, although it will take it very, very seriously indeed. It'll report at the end of next year, and I think there'll be a tremendous pressure on the government then to come up with some kind of solution, and on the Greens I might say too, but after that committee reports, and maybe even have a price on carbon in place before the next election. In
fact, I spoke to Andrew Wilkie just before he came down here tonight, and he's indicated, although he was invited onto the committee, he's declined because there are 2 other committees, one in particular on poker machines and gambling, that he has a very intense interest in, even though he says the climate change one is important, so he'll be going that way. But nonetheless, Rob Oakeshott may take up that invitation.
He may well, and I don't know whether he will or not, Kerry. But I think the interesting thing here too is in the last Parliament, of course, we did see the Greens help to scuttle what the government wanted to do. I don't think that we'll see it that this time round. I think there is real pressure now on the Greens to deliver something out of this, and they might have to move a little bit. Now, the government's targets were now 5%.
They might have to move quite a lot.
Absolutely. The government's target's 5%, which was utterly inadequate, we were told the last time around. 5% by 2020, 25% of the rest of the world moves. Well, the Greens may have to shift their targets, and their targets are substantial, 25 to 40%. And I think, as I say, I think it's in the Greens' interest to emerge with something from this Parliament.
Chris Uhlmann, thanks.
Thanks, Gary.